All right, guys, we are picking up after World War II, and so this is Module 21 here, 21A, and we will do 21B as well with this. And basically, I mean, usually, guys, when we're in class, I'd get through this, and then, you know, people are graduating. It's over. This is obviously going a lot faster with no questions, no give and take, the inability of me to kind of show videos in between, that sort of thing. We'll take our time here, but you know, I'm going to try and keep these lectures down under 30 minutes and just post them throughout the week and so forth. So there's a ton to learn here, guys, the repercussions of which we still feel the effects of today. There's some very interesting history here. This is the history that, now I wasn't born in 1946, but those that were born in 1946 were the start of the baby boom generation, which you know, includes a lot of your parents, your grandparents, and so forth. So that actually extends till 1965, 46 to 65. The baby boom generation. So anyhow, want to pick up here. It's a new world coming out of this thing, man. We're going to have two superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union. And before long, these two are going to become enemies. They were obviously allies during World War II. But one of the first things President Truman had to do was, you know, we ended the war. A couple of things, guys. We are going to keep troops in Germany for 10 years, till 1955, when West Germany is given their sovereignty. All our troops will pull out. Well, that's not totally true, guys. It is now 2020, and we still have American troops in Germany. We have two major Air Force bases there, and U.S. troops stationed there as we speak. Okay. We are going to occupy Japan for 5 years. General MacArthur is going to stay there, and he's going to be in charge, basically govern Japan for 5 years. We will rewrite their constitution for them and really pacify them. Japan really becomes kind of a country that has a very small military, unable to really defend itself. We will be their protector. We will help them reorganize their economy, and what will turn into one of the great success stories of post-World War II is Japan, who is now a close ally of the United States and friend. So we're going to stay there for 5 years until we let them govern themselves. So this whole thing about unconditional surrender at the end of the war is going to pay some huge dividends, as will some of the decisions that are made here. This is why when you hear me talk about Truman, as a Democrat, I mean, I really respect the guy. You know, with the cards he was dealt, I felt like he did a good job for the most part. You know, obviously I didn't agree with him on everything, but I think, you know, I thought he did a pretty good job. But anyhow, so we're going to bring the boys home, okay? That includes women as well, okay? As you guys did, if you did the homework assignment, you know, there were a lot of American women that wore the uniform, flying planes, different services, and the Navy as well, and then nursing and so many other things, okay? And of course their contribution at home, women, when it came to the factories, defense factories. I know in Wichita, guys, we had over 25,000 women working in the defense factories here. So a lot to be proud of there, and the sacrifice of so many Americans. So we have, at the end of the war, we had 12 million personnel in uniform, okay? A massive army, all right? And so we don't need that. The war's over. So in a very short period of time, we're going to have millions of Americans coming back into civilian life. They're going to be discharged out of the military. What do we do with all these people? So the military itself is going to drop to about 3 million, which is still massive, okay, for American standards. Eventually that'll drop. But Truman was worried about the disintegration of our military, but we were still the only nation with the atomic bomb. Now, not for long. because as you guys, I told you, the Russians had spies at the Manhattan Project, and well, they're going to get this very soon. Okay, and so now we're going to have two superpowers, both with atomic weapons, and as we hit the 1950s, guys, 52. We're going to see hydrogen weapons, okay? And then the Russians will get that pretty quick too, because yes, they had spies there as well, helping with that, okay? So Congress is actually prepared for this. I'm going to be talking a lot about the 80th Congress, which is the first post-war Congress, and it's going to be a Republican Congress. The Republicans are going to win control for the first time. I think, I don't know, I have it in the notes. It might be since the Civil War, that they'll control both houses, okay? All right, so they passed what was called the Servicemen's Adjustment Act, or the GI Bill of Rights, okay? GI, I don't know if I ever talked about that with you. GI stands for Government Issue, so you talk about GI Joe, Government Issue Joe, okay? They're going to do four things, four areas that they're going to focus on. First, they're going to build VA hospitals, Veterans Administration Hospitals, okay? This is one here in Wichita. Of course, we have McConnell Air Force Base. And this is the Bob Dole VA Hospital. It's on East Kellogg on the north side of the road. You've driven by it many times, I'm sure. Okay, not sure if you knew it was there. So anyhow, we're going to build hospitals for our veterans. We're going to give them preferences in government jobs. So if you're building this, you got a construction jobs. If a civilian applied for a construction job or a veteran did, the veteran is going to get the job. Or you're staffing this with doctors and nurses. Your military nurses and doctors, they're going to get first pick on this, okay? So we're going to give them preferences in jobs. We're going to earmark, which means set aside money, loans for homes and businesses for those returning that want to start a business, buy a home, start a family, these sorts of things. We're going to set up loans for them, okay? And then this is probably the biggest part of the GI Bill is the free college or job training. This is a massive expansion of our university system. At one time, guys, 8 million GIs will take the government up on this bonus here, or this, thing we're doing for the military, okay? This brings up some interesting dynamics, okay? So the government's going to pay for all these people to go to college. And, first thing, guys, coming out of the Depression, college enrollment was already small because of the Depression. People couldn't afford to go to college. And so really you had, your elite people, people that had a lot of money, and then you had your really smart people that the universities would give scholarships to because they wanted those people to go to college there. And so we had a small, the number of people that were going to college was pretty small. Well, that's just going to explode. Okay, and one of the things you have to kind of talk about here is that, not all of these veterans are qualified to go to college by standards of pre-World War II of who was going to college. They're going to have to lower standards for a lot of these folks. Okay, not being mean, it's just a reality. Okay, so the prestigiousness of our university system, which is still pretty good, takes a little bit of a hit there because of the lowering of standards and so forth. You're also going to see the cost of education start to rise. Anytime the government gets involved with grants and student loans and this sort of thing, the universities know they can charge more because they know the government's going to be helping to fund that, and so that's one of the reasons when you look at the expensive cost of education, it's not that the professors are making, millions of dollars, because they're not. Now, Bill Self is, okay, he's the highest paid employee in the state of Kansas. Greg Marshall's one of the, these people make more than the governor, obviously. So, well, it really deals with, these campuses and what they're spending all this money on student centers and facilities for athletics and so forth. That money's got to come from somewhere. And then really another place that a lot of people don't really focus on, why educational costs have gone up so much, is a lot of new departments. So when you set up obviously you have a business school, you have an engineering school, Okay, these sorts of things, agricultural school, within these colleges. Well, they started adding all these different schools within the school, like, gender studies school, okay? These sorts of things where you're going to have to hire a dean of that school. You're going to have assistant and associate deans, all right? And then all the people that work within that school, within the school, guys, that's expensive, okay? And if you have, I don't know, 100 people majoring in gender studies, and you have all of these people that are making $100,000 a year or more as the dean and associate dean, well, guys, it's not paying for itself. So everybody else is going to pay more to add into these other majors that, sure, they're important if you want to, have African American studies or what have you. Yeah, I mean, Russian literature, all these things. But do they pay for themselves, or is everybody, the rest of the student body, having to pay for these additional majors and departments? Okay, so it's something to think about when you look at the cost of education. All right. So that's going here. Yep, people had to decide what they were going to do when they got back. Okay, move to the next slide here. Okay, one of the big fears, what do we do with this atomic power, this weapon? And one of the first things we had to make sure it didn't fall into the wrong hands. Okay, so the Atomic Energy Act made sure that there was a government monopoly on fissionable materials like uranium and plutonium, so that these could not fall into the wrong hands. So it is very much, when uranium is pulled out of the ground, it is tracked. It has its own DNA. So if there's ever an explosion or anything like that, or a dirty bomb or something like that, you can trace back to, they track where that uranium was mined, what country it went to, when it changed hands, and all this. So it's something that needs to be regulated, okay? And then we looked for peaceful uses of atomic energy as well, okay? And of course we found that in what are called nuclear power plants, okay? And we started building these guys in the late 40s, 50s, and 60s. We built quite a few of these all over the country. A country like France today, now this may be a little bit dated, but I know about 15 years ago, they were getting 80% of their electricity from nuclear power. We have a plant here in Kansas, near Burlington, called Wolf Creek Nuclear Power Plant. The thing about Wolf Creek and most of the others in this country is they are old. They are, 40, 50, 60 years old, okay? So there is a little bit of a fear of nuclear energy. I mean, you've all heard of Chernobyl. Mostly, I think you have, in Russia. And there's some great documentaries out there right now on Chernobyl, which is, it's very frightening. And then the other major one that would happen recently was Fukushima in Japan, when they had a tidal wave, a tsunami, and guys, it hit. I mean, they had a reactor near the coastline, okay, which some people think is kind of crazy, but you've got to have access to a lot of water to cool these plants. You have to cool the nuclear core, and so you need access to a lot of water. That's why Wolf Creek, and there's a lake right by the one in Kansas. So when that tsunami hit, guys, it's just a horrible thing. A lot of people died, and just some gut-wrenching stories of the workers there that were trying to, somehow cool down the reactor when this happened. And obviously, these people are exposed to massive amounts of radiation. You can have the best equipment and suits and everything that money can buy, but it can't protect you from that level of radiation. So it's pretty scary. In the United States, probably the biggest scare we had was back in the late 70s. Off the coast of Pennsylvania, there's an island that's called 3 Mile Island, and there's 3 large nuclear reactors there that provide a lot of energy, electricity for the people that live there. And one of the 3 reactors started to overheat, and they actually evacuated like 1 million people, okay, which is crazy. And it turned out okay. They were able to, get things under control there. But the fear of nuclear power plants is something that's legitimate. Now, we talk about green energy. We talk about wind farms. I saw Chuck Grassley from Iowa tweet the other day that now Iowa gets the majority of its electricity from wind power. Okay. Something that they invested in pretty early on. We talk about solar panels. Okay, anything that's not a fossil fuel, which includes nuclear power. Guys, it's expensive up front, fairly expensive to maintain, but the amount of energy you can get from these plants and the ones they can build now are far superior to what they were building in the 50s and 60s, guys. So the problem is we're not building them. Okay, so we are relying on fossil fuel. If you're a greenie, believe in this Green New Deal stuff, obviously you cannot power automobiles with solar and wind. Okay, so you've got to come up with other sources. And you really can't power, you can power automobiles with nuclear, but we do that with aircraft carriers. But doing that in your car might not be the safest thing. So I think, we're stuck with these fossil fuels for a while until we come up with alternatives. But nuclear power is certainly a good alternative. The only real problem we have with that is the waste. So there is a nuclear waste that is generally stored on site where these nuclear power plants are. Now, some states like South Carolina, they see a way to make some money and they say, okay, we will house your nuclear waste for you. Just send it over to us and pay us a nice big fee and we'll store it. Great way to make some money for your state. The federal government tried to build a waste facility for the whole country. In the desert of New Mexico, there's a mountain called Yucca Mountain. It's out in the middle of nowhere. Nobody lives even within 100 miles, really, of this isolated area. And they dug a big hole into this mountain. Massive. You could drive in huge dump trucks in there. And they put down this material, like a coating and just a sheet of laminate that, if the nuclear waste, were to, fall out of one of the barrels, it would be protected. It would not go down into the groundwater or anything like that. And so they were all set to start moving some of this stuff from other states there, and they got sued. And basically the court said that you had to prove that this liner would not leak for 1 million years. Now, guys, you just can't do that. You can't prove that. And so all that work went unused, okay? So Yucca Mountain is not being utilized for this purpose, okay? Enough about nuclear energy, okay? All right. So one of the fears we had coming out of the war, like World War I, was that the economy was going to slow down. And, obviously, guys, we were in the Depression going into World War II. And so there was fears here. So Congress signed the Employment Act of 1946. The Council of Economic Advisors was created to advise President Truman and Congress on how to get the economy moving after the war. Trying to create jobs and prosperity. Well, guys, as it turned out, things went pretty well after the war. The economy actually did very well. Now, if you were a woman working in the defense factory, say in Wichita at Boeing, and all these men come home from the war, guess what's going to happen? That's right. You're probably going to lose your job. There's a good chance. And that's going to go to a man. Okay, this is 1946, guys. It's a different world. But a reality at the time. So a lot of women lost jobs, but at the same time, a lot of women got married, and they started having kids. Okay, and we see the baby boom with that. Okay, now labor unions wanted higher wages, as they always do. Okay, we saw a national railroad strike, coal miner strike. Coal was still a big source of fuel for us. And Truman really got upset about this, and he seized both industries. So at the time, they tried to pass this national emergency bill that said, you know, if a strike is creating a national economic emergency, the president could take certain actions, okay? And what they wanted to do here was fire the striking workers, they'd lose their benefits, and be forced to join the army. Well, that's not constitutional, is it? So no, that did not pass, but it did scare them back to work. Okay, now, subsequently, later on, a national economic emergency bill was passed that said if a strike did threaten the economy of the United States, the president could force them back to work or fire them, not make them join the army. Okay, so let me give you an example. When Bill Clinton was president, I think it was FedEx. FedEx went on strike. No, I think it was UPS. UPS went on strike. Now, UPS is a massive carrier of you know, boxes and packet parcels and all that, right? And he, you know, possibly could have instituted this and forced these people back to work, but there are other carriers of parcels like United States Postal Service, DSL, FedEx, okay? So if UPS can't get their act together with their employees, these other people pick up the slack, not a national emergency. Now, in the 80s, the air traffic controllers went on strike. Okay, these are the people that work at the airport, and they make sure that planes don't run into each other in the sky, or more importantly, at the airport, where you have very busy airports like O'Hare in Chicago, Hartsfield in Atlanta, which I think is the busiest one in the United States now, Dallas. I mean, crazy busy airports. And guys, you got planes taking off and landing all the time. So this is a stressful job, and you have hundreds of lives in your hands at any given time. Well, they wanted better pay, they wanted better benefits, better working conditions. Now, you don't have to have a college degree to be a air traffic controller. And so the union went on strike, and President Reagan, who used to run a union himself, the Actors Guild in Hollywood, threatened him. He said, look, if you don't go back to work, I think he gave him 48 hours, you will be fired and you will forfeit your jobs. And they called his bluff. They did not go back to work. And Reagan laid off 11,000, fired 11,000 air traffic controllers. Okay. And now, how are you going to fly planes? You need aircraft controllers. Well, where can you find people that know how to read radar? The military. So Reagan brought in the military to train new air traffic controllers, and those people never got their jobs back. Okay, so the moral of the story is, don't mess with Reagan. Okay, the irony of the story is a few years later, after Reagan died, they named Washington, D.C. International Airport Ronald Reagan International Airport after he had fired 11,000 airport workers. There's your irony. Okay. Okay. One last thing here. Inflation. Truman, guys, you're going to have a correction, right? We go through the Depression. Prices were low. Okay. Then you go through the war. We had rationing, price controls by the government. They made sure that there was no gouging when there were shortages of tobacco and fuel and rubber and nylon and silk and all these things, right? Sugar. And so they had price controls. Well, when the war is over, guys, there's got to be a correction. I mean, the market is going to determine what the prices are generally, unless you have the government do that. Okay? And so Truman wanted price controls, and this 80th Congress that I'm going to be talking about, this Republican Congress, said no. Okay? And the result, guys, is a correction in prices. Wholesale prices on food, clothing, and fuel all went up 25%, which is, significant. But at the same time, employment was up, wages were up, and so people could afford to live in the United States, okay? So it wasn't like you were breaking the bank here, okay? So I'm at about 25 minutes. Got two slides today. I might be recording another one of these, and I'll be posting these next week. I'll probably post 3 next week, and then we'll keep going the following week. Like I said, we're way ahead of schedule. No videos attached with this one, but hopefully you found it interesting. See you next time.